Hello and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Jobs Explained podcast, where we celebrate academia and bring education to everyone.
Absolutely.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into a role that's often misunderstood, but is absolutely essential to the academic landscape,
Yeah,
the adjunct professor.
you're right. They really are a cornerstone of higher education.
And whether you're thinking about a career in academia or just curious about how universities work, understanding the adjunct professor role can be incredibly valuable.
It really can.
And for those of you actively exploring higher education careers, academicjobs.com is a fantastic resource for digging deeper into these types of positions.
Yes.
So let's start by clarifying, what exactly is an adjunct professor?
Well, unlike full-time tenure-track professors, adjunct professors hold part-time contractual positions.
Okay,
That means their primary focus is on teaching, not on research or publishing.
that makes sense. And it's surprisingly common. One of our sources mentions that a whopping 90% of college faculty are non-tenure track.
Exactly. That statistic really highlights how much of the teaching workload in higher education rests on the shoulders of adjunct professors.
So they're like the backbone of teaching, but without the same long-term commitment as tenured faculty.
Yes, and that structure has significant implications for both the professors and the institutions.
Speaking of implications, what kind of responsibilities and requirements come with being an adjunct professor?
Well, their core responsibility is teaching. That includes developing syllabi, engaging students in the classroom, and evaluating their performance.
And what about qualifications?
Hmm.
I imagine they need a solid academic background.
Absolutely. Most four-year institutions look for candidates with at least a master's degree, often a doctorate in their field.
So someone with an MFA might teach creative writing, while someone with a PhD in history might teach undergraduate history courses.
Precisely. But the requirements can be a bit more flexible at community colleges or technical schools. Sometimes a bachelor's degree paired with extensive relevant experience can be enough.
So there are pathways for professionals to share their real-world expertise without necessarily having the highest academic degree.
Yes, and that's one of the things that makes adjunct professors so valuable. They often bring a unique perspective to the classroom that a tenured professor might not have.
That's a great point. They're actively working in their fields, so they can offer insights into the latest trends and technologies.
For example, imagine you're a student taking a course on special education. Wouldn't you rather learn from an adjunct who's currently supervising special education teachers in the field than a tenured professor whose experience might be a bit dated?
I see what you mean. That direct connection to current practices can make a huge difference in the learning experience. And speaking of different experiences, what are some of the reasons someone might choose to become an adjunct professor in the first place?
Well, there are all sorts of motivations, and they're not all financial. Some people are drawn to the intellectual stimulation of teaching and the satisfaction of sharing their knowledge with the next generation.
I can see how that would be appealing.
And of course, for some, it can be a way to earn additional income or gain valuable teaching experience that can be helpful for career advancement in other areas.
Our sources mention that adjunct teaching can also be a great way for professionals to stay connected to their field, especially after retirement.
Right. And think about the networking opportunities. One source mentioned using their adjunct position to place graduate students in hard-to-fill roles within their school district. That's a great example of how being an adjunct professor can open doors and build connections.
It sounds like being an adjunct professor can be a rewarding experience on many levels, and not just financially. But what about the benefits beyond those we've already touched on? What makes this role truly unique?
One of the biggest perks is the flexibility. Adjunct professors often have more control over their schedules, choosing to teach in person, online, or a mix of both.
That kind of flexibility is especially appealing for people who already have demanding careers or other commitments.
Exactly. Plus, adjunct professors tend to be less caught up in the internal politics that can sometimes dominate academia.
Now you've piqued my curiosity. Can you elaborate a little on what you mean by the politics of academia?
Certainly. There are things like vying for tenure, competing for limited grant money, or navigating complex departmental hierarchies. Adjunct professors typically avoid these kinds of pressures.
So they can focus more on their teaching and their students?
Yes, their primary concern is delivering quality instruction.
So far, we've explored what an adjunct professor is, the typical responsibilities and qualifications, and even some of the motivations and benefits of choosing this path. But what about the practical steps? For someone who's intrigued by the idea of becoming an adjunct professor, where should they even begin?
Well, a great place to start is academicjobs.com. They have a ton of resources specifically for aspiring adjunct professors.
Perfect. We'll make sure to highlight those resources throughout this deep dive. But even before diving into job boards, what are some of the initial steps someone should consider?
Well, the first step is identifying your ideal teaching areas. What subjects are you most passionate about? Where does your expertise lie? You want to align your skills and interests with the courses you choose to teach.
That makes sense. You wouldn't want to teach a subject you weren't truly interested in.
Exactly. Then once you've narrowed down your focus, it's all about crafting a compelling curriculum vitae that showcases your relevant experience and qualifications.
So highlight those experiences that demonstrate your teaching ability, your expertise in your field, and any professional certifications you might have.
Precisely. You want to make sure your CV stands out and reflects why you would be a valuable addition to their faculty.
And what about networking? Is that an important part of the process?
Absolutely. Talk to other adjunct professors, connect with full-time faculty members in your field, and try to attend industry events where you can meet people in academia. Building those connections can be invaluable.
They can provide guidance, mentorship, and maybe even inside information about open adjunct positions.
They can. And they can give you a realistic sense of what it's actually like to be an adjunct professor.
Okay, so we've covered choosing your teaching areas, crafting a strong CV, and the importance of networking. What are some of the other practical steps someone should take when pursuing an adjunct position?
Of course, you'll want to start exploring job boards and college websites for open positions. And again, academicjobs.com is a great resource for finding those listings.
Their site has a dedicated section specifically for adjunct professor opportunities.
That's right. And one more tip, don't be afraid to be proactive. If you have a unique course idea, why not develop a proposal and pitch it to a department chair?
That's a great way to show initiative and a genuine interest in contributing to the department.
Yes. And it can help you stand out from other applicants who might simply be submitting their CVs and hoping for the best.
So taking charge of your career destiny, that's a good lesson for any field. But now I'm wondering what happens once you've applied for a position. What can someone expect during the interview process for an adjunct position?
Well, much like other academic interviews, they'll likely want to discuss your teaching philosophy, your experience working with students, and of course, your knowledge of the subject matter.
Be prepared to discuss your approach to teaching any relevant experience you have and be able to demonstrate a deep understanding of the subject you want to teach.
Yes, and since adjunct positions often require schedule flexibility, be ready to talk about your availability.
It's also important to have some thoughtful questions ready to ask the interviewers. It shows you're engaged and genuinely interested.
It really does. And remember, even if you don't land the first adjunct position you interview for, don't get discouraged.
Persistence is key in any job search, but especially in a field as competitive as academia.
You're absolutely right. And academicjobs.com has a lot of resources on how to stay positive and motivated during your job search.
That's a great reminder for our listeners. Now, while this all sounds very positive, we want to make sure we're presenting a balanced picture. What are some of the challenges that come with being an adjunct professor?
Well, one of the biggest drawbacks is the lack of job security.
That's right. Adjunct positions are contractual, so there's no guarantee of continued employment, which I imagine can make things really tricky for adjuncts trying to build a stable career.
It can. You might be teaching a course one semester, but with no guarantee of a position the next.
That must make it difficult to plan financially and feel confident about your future in academia.
It certainly does. And that constant uncertainty can sometimes overshadow the otherwise rewarding aspects of being an adjunct professor.
What other challenges should potential adjuncts be aware of?
Another major challenge is the relatively low pay compared to tenured professors.
Our sources mentioned that adjunct salaries can vary a lot, but they're generally much lower than what full-time faculty members earn, which seems unfair considering they often bring just as much expertise to the classroom.
It is a concern. It can be frustrating for adjunct professors who are dedicating their time and expertise to educating students, but without the same financial compensation as their tenured counterparts.
It's definitely something to consider carefully when weighing the pros and cons of this career path.
Absolutely. And it's another area where academicjobs.com can be incredibly helpful. They have resources on salary data and negotiation tips specifically for adjunct positions.
That's a great tip for our listeners. So we've touched on the challenges of job insecurity and lower pay, but are there any other potential drawbacks to being an adjunct professor?
Yes. There's one more that often comes up. Adjunct professors often lack access to the same resources and support systems as their tenured counterparts.
Interesting. Can you tell us more about what that looks like in practice?
Well, for instance, they might not have dedicated office space access to research funding or the same opportunities for professional development.
So they're often expected to do the same work engage with students on the same level, but without the same level of institutional support.
It can feel that way, and it's something to be aware of when considering this career path.
It sounds like being an adjunct professor requires a lot of resilience, self-motivation, and a genuine passion for teaching.
It certainly does.
So while there are definitely rewards to being an adjunct professor, it's crucial to go into this role with a realistic understanding of both the upsides and the downsides.
That's-
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've defined what an adjunct professor is, explored their typical responsibilities, and discussed the motivations for pursuing this career path.
Yep.
We've even touched on some of the unique benefits and potential drawbacks.
Yes, we have, but there's still so much more to explore.
Exactly. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll be delving even deeper into the world of the adjunct professor. We'll be discussing the impact of this role on the overall student experience and examining the evolving landscape of higher education.
We'll also be exploring the larger trends that are shaping academia and looking at the ways in which adjunct professors are navigating this changing terrain.
So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into the fascinating world of the adjunct professor. We'll be right back after a short break.
And if you'd like to learn more about adjunct positions, you can check out academicjobs.com. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of adjunct professors. Before the break, we were discussing some of the challenges inherent in this role.
Yes, we talked about the lack of job security,
Uh-huh.
the relatively low pay compared to tenured professors, and the limited access to resources and support.
And those challenges have real consequences, not only for the professors themselves, but for the institutions and the students as well.
That brings us to a crucial question we wanted to explore in this deep dive. What impact does the prevalence of adjunct professors have on the overall learning experience for college students?
Well, it's a complex question with no easy answers. There are both potential benefits and drawbacks to consider.
On the one hand, adjunct professors can offer a fresh perspective and real-world experience that can make the learning experience more engaging and relevant for students.
That's right. They're often working professionals who are actively engaged in their fields. So that means they can bring current knowledge industry insights and practical examples to the classroom in a way that a tenured professor might not be able to.
So for students, learning from someone who is actively practicing what they preach can be incredibly valuable.
Absolutely. It can bridge the gap between theory and practice, making the subject matter more relatable and applicable to real-world situations.
And their flexibility can be an asset, allowing them to teach a wider range of courses and accommodate students with different schedules.
That's true. Adjunct professors can often adapt to the changing needs of students and institutions more easily than tenured faculty.
But on the flip side, the challenges faced by adjunct professors, especially job insecurity and low pay, can have a ripple effect on the quality of education students receive.
That's an important point. If an adjunct professor is juggling multiple jobs, constantly worried about their next contract or struggling to make ends meet, it's understandable if their focus isn't solely on their students.
They might not have as much time to dedicate to course preparation grading or providing individual support to students.
And they might not have the same opportunities to engage in research or develop new teaching materials, which could limit the depth and breadth of their instruction.
It's a difficult balancing act. On the one hand, adjuncts bring real-world experience and flexibility. On the other hand, the system they work in creates challenges that can affect their ability to fully invest in their teaching.
It's a classic dilemma in higher education, and it's one that deserves thoughtful consideration as we evaluate the role of adjunct professors in shaping the future of academia.
So it's not a simple issue with a clear-cut solution. It's a nuanced situation with both advantages and disadvantages to consider.
Precisely. And this is exactly the kind of complex issue that academicjobs.com explores in depth. Their blog features articles and discussions on the challenges and opportunities facing adjunct professors, offering diverse perspectives and valuable insights.
That's a great resource for anyone who wants to dive deeper into this topic. And it's crucial to remember that the increasing reliance on adjunct professors is part of a larger trend in higher education.
Yes, and it's a trend driven by a number of factors.
What are some of the forces at play that have led to this shift?
Well, there's a growing emphasis on cost-cutting measures in higher education. Hiring adjunct professors on a part-time contractual basis is often seen as a way for institutions to save money and maintain flexibility.
I see. It allows universities to offer a wider variety of courses without having to commit to the long-term costs associated with hiring tenured faculty.
Exactly. It's a way to adapt to fluctuating enrollment numbers and budget constraints. But as we've discussed, there are potential downsides to this approach.
The reliance on adjuncts can create instability for the professors. limit student access to resources and support, and potentially even compromise the quality of education being offered.
It's a complex issue with a wide range of consequences, both positive and negative.
And it's a conversation that needs to continue. As we move forward, it's crucial to consider how we can create a system that both supports adjunct professors and ensures the best possible learning experience for students.
I agree. It's all about finding a balance.
Well, we've explored the challenges and implications of the increasing prevalence of adjunct professors. Now let's shift gears and talk about how the role of the adjunct professor fits into the broader landscape of higher education.
Okay. Where would you like to start?
Well, we've talked about the responsibilities, motivations, benefits, and challenges. But how does it all fit together in the grand scheme of things? What does the future hold for adjunct professors?
That's a great question. And honestly, the future of the adjunct role is a topic of much debate within academia.
What are some of the different perspectives on this issue?
Well, some experts believe that the trend of relying on adjunct professors will continue to grow, especially as institutions face ongoing financial pressures and the demand for flexible teaching arrangements increases.
So we might see even more adjunct professors in the classroom in the coming years.
It's certainly a possibility. Others argue that the current system is unsustainable in the long run, both for professors and for students.
That the reliance on adjunct professors is ultimately detrimental to the quality and accessibility of higher education.
Exactly. And there are calls for reforms that would provide adjunct professors with greater job security, better compensation, and more access to resources and support.
So a push to create a more equitable and sustainable model for adjunct teaching.
Yes, a system that recognizes the valuable contributions of adjunct professors and ensures that they have the tools and support they need to thrive.
And of course, academicjobs.com is a great place to stay informed about these discussions and explore the evolving landscape of higher education.
They have a wealth of resources, including articles, webinars, and discussion forums that delve into these issues in depth.
So for anyone interested in following the trends and debates shaping the future of academia, I highly recommend checking out their website.
I second that. Now let's transition to a more practical aspect of our deep dive. For those listening who are intrigued by the idea of becoming an adjunct professor, let's walk through the steps they can take to pursue this path.
Okay, let's break down the process into actionable steps. First things first, what are the typical qualifications someone needs to become an adjunct professor?
As we mentioned earlier, most institutions require at least a master's degree in the field they want to teach. Some community colleges or technical schools might consider candidates with a bachelor's degree and substantial relevant work experience.
So a strong academic background in the subject you want to teach is essential.
It is, but it's always a good idea to research the specific requirements of the institutions you're interested in because they can vary.
Right. So once you've determined that you meet the educational requirements, what's the next step?
Well, then it's time to craft a compelling curriculum vitae that showcases your skills, experience, and passion for teaching.
Essentially, you need a CV that stands out from the crowd, highlighting your expertise, your teaching experience, and any professional certifications or publications you have.
Yes, you want to demonstrate why you would be an asset to their faculty and why you're the best candidate to teach those particular courses.
It's about showcasing your unique qualifications and demonstrating your commitment to education.
Precisely. And as we discussed before, networking can play a crucial role in this process as well.
It's all about connecting with people who are already working in academia, getting advice, and learning about potential opportunities.
Reach out to other adjunct professors, attend industry events, and connect with full-time faculty members in your field. Building those relationships can open doors.
So you've got your CV polished, you're actively networking, and you're ready to start applying. Where do you find these adjunct positions?
There are a number of resources you can explore. Of course, you can check the job boards and websites of colleges and universities directly.
And don't forget about academicjobs.com. They have a dedicated section for adjunct professor opportunities with a searchable database of listings from institutions across the country.
It's an excellent resource for finding positions that align with your interests and qualifications.
So you've found some positions that look interesting. You've submitted your CV, and now you're waiting to hear back. What can someone expect during the interview process for an adjunct position?
Well, the interview process for an adjunct position is similar to other academic interviews. You'll likely be asked about your teaching philosophy, your experience working with students, and your knowledge of the subject matter.
So be prepared to discuss your approach to teaching. Share relevant anecdotes about your experience and demonstrate your passion for the subject you want to teach.
Exactly. They'll also want to know about your availability. Adjunct positions often require flexibility in terms of scheduling.
And it's always a good idea to have some thoughtful questions prepared for the interviewers. It shows that you're engaged and genuinely interested in the position.
Absolutely. Asking insightful questions can make a positive impression and demonstrate that you've done your homework.
So you've aced the interview and you've landed the adjunct position. Congratulations.
Right.
Now, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting out as an adjunct professor?
Well, I would say go in with both enthusiasm and a realistic understanding of the role's demands.
Embrace the opportunity to share your passion, connect with students, and bring your real-world experience to the classroom.
But also be prepared for the challenges we've discussed. Remember that job security can be limited. The pay is often lower than that of tenured professors, and access to resources might be restricted.
But never lose sight of the value that you bring as an educator.
Your expertise, your passion, and your commitment to student success are essential to the academic community.
If you ever feel overwhelmed or uncertain, don't hesitate to reach out to the resources available on academicjobs.com.
They have a wealth of information and tools to support you throughout your journey as an adjunct professor.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored the multifaceted role of the adjunct professor, from their daily responsibilities to the broader implications of their presence in higher education.
We've examined the challenges and rewards of this unique career path and discussed the evolving landscape of academia.
And we've offered practical advice for anyone considering pursuing a career as an adjunct professor.
But there's one final thought I want to leave our listeners with.
Okay, what's your parting wisdom for those who are interested in the world of adjunct teaching?
As you embark on this journey, I encourage you to embrace the challenges, celebrate the rewards, and always remember the profound impact you have on the lives of your students.
That's a powerful message. And it brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of adjunct professors.
I hope you found this exploration insightful and informative.
If you're interested in learning more about higher education jobs, including adjunct positions, be sure to visit academicjobs.com.
To see all higher education jobs, go to academicjobs.com.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of adjunct professors. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep celebrating the power of education. Welcome back to the deep dive. We spent this episode exploring the world of the adjunct professor.
Covering everything from their essential role in academia to the unique challenges they face.
We've delved into their motivations, their responsibilities, and the impact they have on the student experience.
Right. And we've examined the evolving landscape of higher education and how the adjunct role fits into this changing terrain.
But as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to shift our focus to the listener
Okay.
and leave you with a final thought-provoking question.
All right.
A question to ponder as you consider the role of adjunct professors and the future of higher education. What do you have for us?
Well, if the prevalence of adjunct professors continues to rise,
Right.
as some predict, how do you envision the future of higher education evolving?
That's a question with a lot of layers to unpack.
It is.
It really makes you consider the potential long-term impacts on the academic landscape.
Exactly. How might this trend affect curriculum development, faculty diversity, and the overall student experience? Those are all crucial questions to consider.
And they're not easy questions to answer. The future of higher education is being shaped by numerous forces, including technological advancements, economic pressures, and evolving student demographics.
Yeah, absolutely. The role of the adjunct professor is intricately woven into these larger trends.
It's a dynamic and complex situation, and it's essential to engage in these conversations, explore different perspectives, and consider potential solutions.
I agree. And if you're interested in learning more about higher education, including adjunct positions and the broader trends shaping academia, I encourage you to visit academicjobs.com.
It's a fantastic resource for staying informed, exploring career options, and connecting with others who are passionate about the world of higher education.
It is. To our listeners, we encourage you to continue exploring these important questions.
Right.
Engage in thoughtful discussions, and to stay curious about the ever-evolving landscape of higher education.
Absolutely. And if you're looking to learn more about the vast world of higher education jobs, from adjunct positions to full-time faculty roles, be sure to check out academicjobs.com.
To see all higher education jobs, go to academicjobs.com.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of adjunct professors. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep celebrating the power of education.